Hey guys, Matt aka Martiln here, and today I thought I'd show you how I program my drum patterns in Ableton Live using Drum Rack, as well as discuss a little bit about why I mostly program my drums in MIDI as opposed to audio. Just wanted to quickly say that I hope you've been enjoying my videos so far. I've got a few series planned for the near future, but if there's anything in particular you'd like to see more of or just like to see in general, please do let me know. Alrighty, without any further ado, let's jump right in. Okay, so I've got a new Ableton Live session open up here with just a single MIDI track that I've created. I've gotten rid of all my sends and everything else. So the first thing we're going to do is drag on a drum rack to this MIDI channel. And next thing we've got to do is decide what kind of a beat or a drum pattern we want to make. And this will generally determine how many of these slots within the drum rack that I fill up. So what we're going to do for this one, I'm going to fill up all 16 of these drum pads, sample pads here, and then I will be back. So I've filled up my drum rack here with just a few various sounds and samples. How I've structured it, I've got a kick down here. I'll zoom in. So down in the bottom left corner, I've got a kick drum. Then I've got a snare drum, a clap, a rim shot, 2 shakers, closed hi-hats, times 4, 2 open hi-hats, a ride, and then 3 kind of miscellaneous percussion hits. That's pretty cool. So what I often like to do is play in my drum beats, right? So when you drag in a sample into a drum rack, I'm just going to re-drag in, so I'm going to get rid of this, just highlighting it and pressing delete, and then I'm going to re-drag it in. And you'll see when I drag it in, it puts it in immediately into a simpler. It recognizes that it's a kind of a one-shot drum hit, and then it puts it in. What it does immediately is its default settings are volume at -12 and velocity sensitivity at 45%. This is good for most things, but for example, like the kick drum, you often, or at least I often, want my kick drum to hit at a consistent volume. If I want a lower volume kick drum, then I'll use a different sample or just like re-sample that kick drum so that I can trigger it at different times as opposed to just changing the velocity of it. So what we're going to do is a neat little thing. So let's just say for the moment that everything I want to have a blanket volume. So I'm going to drag this velocity just here all the way down to 0%. So that means that whatever velocity I play, it's going to play at the same volume. And then I'm going to put this volume all the way up to 0. So I'm going to click on the volume knob and type in 0 and enter. And then what this is going to do is make sure that regardless of what velocity I play the kick drum at, it's going to always stay the same volume. Next thing I'm going to do, because I want this blanket across everything to start with, I'm going to right click one of them, and then I'm going to go copy value to siblings. And what this will do is every single other instance of simpler within this drum rack is going to apply this value for this particular parameter to. So if I copy, so let's go into the snare really quickly. You can see that the velocity percentage here is at 45%. If I go back to the kick drum, right click it and go copy value to siblings, you can see now it's changed all of them to 0%, just right down here. All of them changed to 0%. So now what I'm going to do is do the same thing with the volume. So right click, copy value to siblings, and now everything is going to be playing at, it's at the same kind of volume, all at a same kind of similar range. And this to me is what I like as a good starting point. So the next thing that we can do is one of a few things. Either play around on a drum pad, which is sometimes what I like to do. I'll just play around on my push, just like something like that. Or I'll double click here, set maybe a 4-bar loop just down here, and then just start to program in a drum beat from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the tempo to, let's say, 110 BPM. That's a pretty nice tempo. And then I'm just going to play in or just program in a simple kind of house beat, I guess. And then I'll be back when that's done. Cool. So that's a good starting point. We've just got kicks on every quarter note and then claps on every second quarter note with this shaker sound in between. So if I put this little headphone kind of icon here, if you see this headphone icon right here at the top left of the piano roll window, if you make that blue, if you click that, then whatever you kind of click on here in the left panel or whenever you put in a note, it's going to make that note sound so you can hear what you're programming in, which is a nice little thing. So I've got this kick drum, this clap, and this shaker. Now, one thing I do want to mention quickly is by putting up the volume, you might want to also drag down the volume, the channel fader, because it might take it into clipping and it might just be a bit too loud for you to work with. So that's okay, just drag down the volume fader. I've had to do that a little bit. So yeah, so the next thing I want to do, I've got this clap sound here, right? It's a cool clap sound, but if I play the beat, it's cool, but what I like with my claps often is for them to be a little bit shifted off the beat. And this is something that happens a lot in kind of modern music production, in house music and kind of future-based music and a lot of things. So this clap, if I highlight it, so highlight all the claps by clicking the clap key here, that will highlight all these claps. And then what I'm going to do is just hold down Command or Control for your PC users, and then press the left arrow key. So what this is going to do is just move all of those MIDI notes just slightly off the grid so that it's not snapping to anything. See, if I don't hold down Command and I just move it, that's what it's going to do. It's going to snap immediately to the previous note. So what I'm going to do now is if I play you this, it's cool. It kind of gives it more room to breathe, gives the kick drum more room to breathe rather than the clap and the kick drum's transients hitting at the same time. It kind of, they're still together, but they have this kind of separation which helps in mixing and helps in being able to discern both of their sounds. So the next thing I'm going to do is fill in these gaps a little bit using things like closed hi-hats, open hi-hats, some percussion, and some snares and stuff as well. So I'm going to do something really quickly and then I will be back with you. Cool. So we've got a nice little beat here. I've just kind of put in some hi-hats and stuff, just filled in the gaps a little bit. I can play it to you now. And it just repeats that. So what I want to do now is I'm going to go back. So I'm going to hold Shift and Tab. And now I'm going to figure out what things I want the velocity to be able to affect. So what sounds I want to have sensitive to the velocity. Now, more often than not, it'll be all of the hi-hat sounds. So I'm going to go into each of the hi-hat sounds and probably take them to about 30%. So just do this on all of the closed hi-hat sounds, and then maybe on the open ones as well. Oops, not on the transpose, on the velocity. Well, for the moment, that's pretty good. So what we're going to go do is now go back to this MIDI clip, and now in order to make it feel kind of more groovy and give it a bit more of a human aspect to it almost, what we're going to do is hold down Command, and we're just going to go and change the velocities on some of these notes to give it different accents in different parts of the beat. So for example, in this one, I kind of wanted just these hi-hats to just be kind of in the background, but still providing some drive. So if I play just these first two beats, you'll hear, you can hear it's different to if they were just straight. It just helps give it a bit more groove. So I'm going to just go through that for all of these, just kind of adjusting the velocity to where I think things might sit well in order to kind of bring out some different accents in places, just to help the beat give it a bit of a different kind of groove. Cool, so now that we've got this done, we've just changed the velocities here a little bit. I'll play it for you. So this is nice now, I like this, but this percussion sound up here, it's a little bit loud for me. So instead of making it so it's sensitive to velocity, what I'm gonna do is, you can do this one of two ways. So I'm gonna turn down the actual channel volume. Actually, you can do this a fair few ways, but the way I'm gonna do it is open up here in the session view. You can see that on the drum rack channel, it's got this kind of, this arrow that you could probably see just here. So if I click that, open that up, what this is gonna do is show me all of the different, what are called chains within this drum rack, and give me the mixing parameters for all of them. So what I'm gonna do is find the percussion sample that I want. You can do this a few ways. The easiest way is just to play it using one of these play buttons, and then see which one has the levels on it. So I'm just going to drag the fader down here while playing the clip until I like the level that it's sitting at. Cool, so I think that's a nice level for that. So the next thing we're gonna do is go into this drum pattern again, and I'm gonna add in some little double time hits and maybe some triplet hits, just some variations on this, maybe add in some other kick drums here and there, and utilize some more of these sounds that we've got. I might double up the loop, and just do a few things to make this beat a little bit more interesting. All right, so I've varied up the beat a little bit. I've done a few things in here which I'll show you how to do and what I did. So first thing I'll do actually is just play you the beat. Cool, so I think that's pretty cool. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is the use of triplets. So there's a few different ways in Ableton that you can change the grid size. You probably can't see it at the moment, but down here, right underneath my webcam, silly thing it is, shows the grid division. Currently it's set to 1/16, so you can change this a few different ways. So one, you can right click and change the fixed grid size using any of these controls here, any of these options. You can change it to 8 bars, 4 bars, 2 bars, 1 bars, half, quarter notes, 8 notes, 16th notes, 32nd notes, or off. Or you can change it to an adaptive grid, which is often the best way to work, I've found. So you can change it to something like narrow, and what this will do is change the grid size relative to how far in you zoom, how far out you zoom, using this top little, the zoom commands there. Or how I often like to do it is if you hold down Command and you press either 1 or 2, what it'll do is either decrease or increase the grid size respectively. So if I hold down Command and 2 and press 2, it's going to increase the grid size. So right now it's at 1 bar. So if I double click and input a note, it's going to input the whole bar. Undo that. And likewise, vice versa. If I press Command and 1, what it's going to do is shorten the grid size to the shortest that the grid size can be at that kind of particular resolution for the piano roll. So this is a really, really quick way of working. And so then in order to change the grid to triplet size, what you can do is instead of pressing Command 1 and Command 2, if you press Command and 3, then it will change the grid to triplets. at whatever the current grid size is set to. So right now I've set it to 1/16, and if I press Command and 3, then it's going to bring it to 1/16 triplets. So when I work in triplets, the best thing I often find to do is to work in triplet eighth notes, because it gets a bit messy sometimes if you work in triplet 16th, depending on the genre of music, obviously. But that's exactly how I've programmed in these notes just here that are triplets. So if I play the beat for you, you'll hear that those 3 notes just there are triplet, or that kind of beat just there is divided into 8th note triplets. And this is cool to add some variation to your beats, just adding some triplets in. It gives a really nice groove, it changes it up a little bit, it's a cool little way to add in a feel change and to add in some variation. The next thing I've done that I'll just showcase for you really quickly, if I just play it from here, this little kind of roll here, and this is one of the reasons I like to use MIDI actually, because what you can do, it's kind of as easy in audio, but it takes a few little extra steps. So let's program this again. So let's get rid of those. Let's put in one note here, and let's go over to the left, just over here, following my mouse, just over here to the left. If you have a look at these 2 little buttons here, the divide by 2 and multiply by 2 buttons, what this will do, whatever note you have selected, it'll either divide it or multiply it by 2 in terms of its note length. So if I divide it by 2, what that's going to do is make it so it's at 1/64th note, the length of 1/64th note. And then if I take I don't even need to take the grid size down. What I'm going to do is select that, and I'm going to duplicate it by pressing Command and D. I'm going to duplicate it 3 times, and then I'm going to select all those notes. And down here, I'm going to open up the velocity a little bit more. So you can see that the velocity of all of them is currently set to 0. What I'm going to do is drag them up a little bit, and then while holding down Command, I'm going to click and drag from the bottom all the way up to the top, pretty much, just kind of about 100 velocity. And you'll see that when I do so, there's this kind of dotted line that comes up when I do so. And what this is going to do is it's going to, well, I'll show you. If I let go, it's going to kind of make the velocities of each of those selected notes so that they line up with wherever that line is. And because our closed hi-hats are velocity sensitive, what this is going to do is create this kind of getting louder effect, like a hi-hat roll, which is really cool, and I like to use that quite a fair bit. So as you can also see, we haven't even utilized all of the sounds, which is totally cool. And again, I've added in some snare hits, and I've just taken down the volume of it because it was a bit loud, instead of, again, reducing the velocity and everything like that. So yeah, I'm just going to have a listen to the beat and see what I want to do next with it. Cool, so there's this one thing that I want to do really, really quickly. With this hi-hat greedo open, it's a cool sound, but what I want to do is make it so that it's gated, so that it doesn't hit for the full length of it. And there's a really, really easy way to do this. So if I just press Shift and Command, and if I just select the hi-hat greedo one, and then instead down here in the simpler mode, it's automatically put it into a one-shot playback mode, which is good because that's what we want for drum hits most of the time. So instead of having it on trigger, I'm going to set it to gate mode. And what this is going to do is it's going to play the sound as soon as the note is triggered. And then as soon as the note is triggered off, it's going to stop the sound completely. So this is another cool thing about this little view here. You can actually play the note from the session view channel. So you can see I'm playing it really, really kind of short. So now what this will do is, because this ends just before the kick, it's actually going to end the hi-hat just before the kick as well, which is pretty cool. It just kind of adds this little background, really nice hi-hat. And I'm going to do that with the other open hi-hat sound as well. Actually, no, instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choke this hi-hat, this other open hi-hat, with, let's say, this closed hi-hat chard 10. So what I'm going to do here in the opened up kind of view under this choke menu just here, I'm going to select choke 1, and then I'm going to select choke 1 on the closed hi-hat chard as well. And what this does is it essentially stops one sound playing whenever the other sound is playing, or whenever another sound within that has that choke number selected being played. So you'll hear it just here. Basically, it chokes this open hi-hat to this charred closed hi-hat so that it doesn't overlap. And as soon as this closed hi-hat hits, whatever sound the open hi-hat was playing is immediately cut off, which is really good for just, again, creating some space so there's no overlap, and it helps in the mixing process as well. So let's just play the beat so you can hear it once more. Cool, I like this a lot. So the next thing we're going to do is some panning. So what I often like to do is pan my hi-hats and percussion, as you've probably seen in my mixing videos. So a really, really easy way of doing this is, again, just in this same mixer view just up here. I'm going to have a look, and I'm just going to play around, try to balance out the hi-hats and the percussion and everything in the spatial spectrum. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be back with you. Cool, so this is sounding pretty nice. Some of the sounds were already panned, such as this, the main shaker, that was actually already panned in the sample quite far left. I've panned it a little bit more, but I'm going to play it for you now, and so you can hear what it kind of sounds like with this now panning. Super basic, just like the hi-hats either way, the open hi-hats either way. I've left this percussion center, the ride in center. I might actually pan that a little bit to the left. And the percussion, I might actually pan a little bit to the left as well. So hopefully you can hear that, what kind of a difference that makes. I like it. So the next thing that I'm actually going to do is within the drum rack. What's cool about it is you can actually have sends within the drum rack. So I'm going to use this to give to put the hi-hats and the percussion and stuff in the same kind of space. So if down here in the drum rack, what I'm going to do, I'll just zoom in really quickly, open up this little chain list bit just here. And what this is going to do is bring up these options down here. So this is the send and return option. If I click on this, the R, what it's going to do is bring up this little kind of return chain view here. If I right click here, I can create a return chain, and then let's say I want a reverb in here. So I'm going to drag a reverb onto here. Let's actually just hot swap this and do like ambience or something. I'm sure this will be okay. And then again, going back down here, if I click on the S, this will bring up the send amount for each of the different sounds within the chain to this, and you'll also see that it shows up here in the mixer view where the send controls would normally show up. So what I'm going to do is just send the hi-hats, all of them, to this reverb that we've now set up, and you'll also see that it shows up here as a chain as well, which is pretty neat. And then I'm going to send maybe this ride as well a little bit, send the snare, maybe the clap a little bit too, and we'll play it and see what it sounds like. Maybe send this percussion block too. So you can hear it's kind of given it a little bit of space, which is really, really nice for drum sounds and just creating patterns in general, and helps with mixing as well. So another cool thing about this return chain here that I'll just show you really quickly, if I create an actual return chain, so what I can do is hold down Alt, Command, and T, and that will create a return chain for me. You'll see here that if I kind of open up this ambience chain here, which is the A return track in this drum rack, it actually allows me to send the audio of that to somewhere else. So what I can do is send it so this return chain that's within this drum rack, the audio from that actually goes directly to this return chain here. So what this allows me to do is say, if I didn't want to have the reverb directly in this drum rack, say if I wanted to have some synths and stuff as well going through this same reverb, I could just create a return track, and then I could send, drag the reverb onto it, and then send all some synths and whatever else that I wanted to that isn't within this drum rack to this same reverb. And you can see here that it's doing exactly that, which is a really, really cool thing. But for the purposes of this, oh no, we'll leave it actually. I think that's cool. So the next thing we're gonna do, let's say hypothetically that we are done with the track, and now we're getting to mix it, and we want to separate all of our drum sounds. There is a really, really easy inbuilt way to do this within drum rack, and I'm gonna show it to you right now. So more often than not, we're gonna want the kick separated. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the kick here. You can either select it here, or you can select it in the chain list down here within the drum rack device itself. But I'm going to select it up here. I'm going to right click on it. And what I'm going to do is go extract chains. You can see this little extract change option just here. So I'm going to do that. And what this is going to do is essentially duplicate just the kick pattern and the sound and any effects that I've applied to it within the drum rack to a new channel, get rid of it from the original drum rack, but maintain all the effects and everything that we've got to it, as well as the MIDI pattern, which is super, super useful. So it means you can continue to work in MIDI if you want to change anything without having to bounce something out and then bring it back in. The only thing you've got to be aware of with this is that when you extract the chain, it's going to take it to 0 decibels on the track volume. So you're going to have to match the track volume here. So what it's at, like negative 11.8. And so, for example, I will also want to grab all of the closed hi-hats, or let's maybe say I want to grab all of the hi-hats, including the ride, and group them together as well. So again, I can do the same thing, except if I just select all of them, so holding down Shift, selecting the first one, and then selecting the last one that I want, and then again, right-clicking and extracting the chains. Then this will again do the same thing, but just extract them onto, extract all of them, every single one of them. So again, if I just negative 11.8, really, really good. The only thing that you will have to watch out for with this is that the return channels don't come through with it as well. So if you are going to do this, make sure you have set up a return here, or so that you can get everything going to the same return. So now I want the hi-hats going to this return as well. And if I play everything, neat. And now I've got the opportunity just to mix everything how I kind of would normally. Let's, separate the shakers as well. Bring these down to negative 11.8. And so what have I got here? So I've got the kick drum in this one just here. I've got snares and percussion, and then hi-hats and shakers. And there you have it. That is how I program my beats using Drum Rack in Ableton Live 9. So there you have it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and got some useful tips and tricks out of it. I know I said I'd give it a little bit of a discussion about programming in MIDI versus audio and my thoughts about that, but I think I'll save that for a later video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like my content, consider heading over to and supporting me on Patreon. There's a link down in the description below. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Martin, and I'll see you in the next video.